It doesn't want you to know what I'm about to tell you. Now, let's be clear. I want to be sure that my language is precise today. When I say China, I'm talking about the Chinese Communist Party. I love and value, as we all do, our Chinese American community and the Chinese people that live here in the United States and those that live in China as well. We want good things for them. And I say genuinely because there's of cases like Xin Wang, a researcher at the University of California, San Francisco, who allegedly lied about being a People's Liberation Army officer, all the while collecting information on UCSF labs. The good news is the FBI nabbed him. And Qi Xiong studied electrical engineering at Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. He tried to enlist in the United States Army. He allegedly omitted his ties to Chinese intelligence, which tasked him with recruiting engineers and scientists where he was working. These are just two examples. But what's more, the Chinese Communist Party deploys dollars just as much as it does cloaks and daggers to get its hands on valuable knowledge. There are many American scholars, often doing research funded by American taxpayers, that have been lured into the Chinese Communist Party's talent recruitment programs. The CCP pays them what is for them a fortune to do research related to their current fields for or in China, and then often uses the fruits of their brainpower to build its military strength. A researcher from my home state of Kansas was caught up in this trap, as was the Harvard chemistry department head. Think about that. The Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, recently described the CCP strategy as rob, replicate, and replace. But I want to add another R to the DNI's list. I want to add repress. Yang Zhuping, a student from China, delivered a commencement address at the University of Maryland back in 2017, just a couple years back now. She praised the fresh air of free speech. She was soon demonized and harassed by CCP propaganda outlets. I promise you, while I cannot tell you everything, that was no coincidence. One University of Georgia student said of the CCP secret police in 2018, quote, "They have harassed me repeatedly and asked me to give them information about the activities of overseas democracy activists and dissidents. And they are particularly interested in the activities of Uyghurs and Tibetans," end of quote. Some of the CCP's biggest victims on campuses are innocent Chinese nationals themselves. And this is a tragedy. We have a responsibility to police this. Another example, at Princeton, just this year, students in a Chinese politics class were forced to use code names on their work, lest the CCP discover their identities and prosecute them for free expression of views on Hong Kong and the CCP under its draconian new national security law. That's right here. This happened right here in the United States of America. American students talk about safe spaces as shelter from ideas they dislike. Chinese students need safe spaces to learn of the ideas that they love. What a stark contrast. Students from China at American universities also live in fear that their families back home will be arrested, will be interrogated, tortured, or worse because of the things they say in an American classroom. But look, the CCP doesn't just target Chinese nationals. They want to influence American students as well. Professors and administrators too. Look, they know that left-leaning college campuses are rife with anti-Americanism and present easy targets for their anti-American messaging. That's why they planted Confucius Institutes on our campuses. And under President Trump, our State Department has made very clear these Confucius Institutes are literally up to no good. Many have gone away. Many campuses have seen that, and they've chosen to close down these institutes. But right here in Georgia, Wesleyan College still has one in Macon. Look, it's why there are groups on campuses called Chinese Student Scholars Association here too. They're directed and almost always funded by the Chinese embassy or a local Chinese consulate. Its purpose, to keep tabs on students and to press pro-Beijing causes. Now you would think At freedom-loving places like Georgia Tech and institutions and scholars all across the world, administrators, school faculty would be more up in arms about the Chinese Communist Party's outright theft and flagrant violation of freedoms that I've described. But we see it too seldom. Well, why? Why do schools censor themselves? They often do it out of fear of offending China. Indeed, I must tell you that MIT wasn't interested in having me to their campus to give this exact set of remarks. President Raphael Reif implied that my arguments might insult their ethnic Chinese students and professors. But of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Those are the very people that this set of remarks is intended to protect their freedoms. And I must say that yielding to the objection of hurt feelings plays right into the Chinese Communist Party's hands. They watch America closely. It's what the party says constantly in response to legitimate criticism around the world. You can see it. And how would the party know how the Chinese people feel anyway, as no one ever gets to vote? Look, we can't let the CCP weaponize political correctness against American liberties. We have to protect and preserve them. Fraudulent cries of racism or xenophobia should never drown out a candid exposure of the activities of the Chinese Communist Party. But we see too often on American campuses that there's silence and censorship. It's been driven by the Chinese Communist Party. Usually boils down to something far less idealistic. So many of our colleges are bought by Beijing.